welcome back to the Nest Axis and Allies player. It's Wars of the World. It's the Mexican-American War with NATO at the helm. Take it away, hun.
Hello everybody, this is Nato at the Nest, and this is the introduction to the new scenario, the Mexican-American War. And that was fought from 1846 to 1848, so 2-year conflict. So gameplay wise, it'll be 5 turns, so another relatively quick scenario, not very big. The next several scenarios will be relatively minor and small. The Crimean War will probably be the biggest one in terms of the next massive scenario. That won't be till World War One. So like I said, it's 1840, so we got about another 60 years to work through before we get to there. Anyways, so like I said, relatively small, minor conflict. And repercussions of it will determine the size of America going forward. So depending on how this goes, America will either have all that territory or it won't. And obviously it'll play a factor in the American Civil War, which is the next scenario. In terms of how big the Union is versus the Confederacy. But we'll worry about that once we get to that scenario. So background of the Mexican-American War, as I alluded to in the previous scenario, is it all centers around Texas. So remember last video I said for 10 years that America had denied Texas' petition to join the United States as a state, and for the reasons stated in the last scenario. Well, America gets a new president with a new agenda, Senate and Congress change, and the theory or concept of manifest destiny started taking root in the general populace of America. The idea that America should stretch from sea to shining sea uninterrupted. And so, as you can see, there's a very big problem in the way of that quote-unquote destiny. Mexico owns half of the western half of what will become the United States. And then when the American president and the cabinet and the general government of the time decided to annex or accept Texas's petition for statehood, that brought all that to a head. Remember, Mexico never, even though they signed the treaty, Mexico never really believed or recognized Texas independence. Mexico, the people and the government still saw Texas as part of Mexico. And the treaty that was signed, it didn't clearly define the border of Texas versus Mexico. Texas, and by extension the United States, saw the border as the Rio Grande River, which is represented by this line. This is roughly where the Rio Grande was. Mexico, they saw the border as another river that was way up here. So the actual boundaries of Texas were never clearly defined, and it was disputed. So you can imagine that this would cause problems when America annexed Texas and Texas became a state. The relatively minor border issue between Texas and Mexico became a much larger border issue between Mexico and the United States. The United States adopted Texas's view that the border is the Rio Grande, and Mexico still held on to the belief that the border was the other river. I don't remember the name, but the other river 100 plus miles to the north. So America sent troops to Texas under the official orders to protect American interests and protect American citizens, blah, 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 blah. My personal opinion, that was a bunch of horseshit. They sent those troops down there to pick a fight with Mexico, because the idea was, you know, if they could entice Mexico into shooting first, then America could claim defensive war. It could claim that it was merely defending its people and rights and interests, and it, you know, it could quote unquote claim the moral high ground. Versus if America just attacked or declared war outright, it would make America look like warmongers, imperialists, yada yada yada. So America sent a small detachment of troops down to Texas and into the disputed territory with the aim, goal, and hope of enticing Mexico to pick a fight. And for better or worse, it worked. A American unit came across a Mexican unit, and no one definitely knows exactly who shot first. Grand scheme of things, it really doesn't matter. The end result is they exchanged fire. Several Americans were killed, several Mexicans were killed, and American government jumped on that news and declared war under the clause of they were attacked and they are merely defending their citizens, defending their troops, and so on and so forth. And so the Mexican War started in spring of 1846, lasted for just under 2 years, and that's pretty much it. That's the historical background of it. I always almost forget this. There is technology in this research. Technology in this scenario. It wasn't last scenario because of the short size. The technology of this scenario is something that was called flying cannon. What that was is cannon previously were big, lumbersome, cumbersome, difficult to move, and I mean, they could be towed, but not easily, not quickly, and all the artillery crews, had to walk, didn't have a quick mode of transportation. Well, someone in America got the bright idea. They had all these carriages running around that, 2 horses hooked to this carriage could carry hundreds of pounds of people and stuff, do it and be able to, do it relatively quickly. Someone in America had the bright idea, well, why don't we take the cab off these carriages and mount the cannon to it, and then give all the artillery crews their own horses. So now the American artillery crews, the American cannoneers, they now had the ability to rapidly fly around the battlefield. They could, and because these carriage chassis were meant and designed to be hooked up and limbered to stuff, that meant that the artillery crews, if they needed to move positions, they could bring in the horses, hook the cannon up to the horses, and then the crews themselves would hop on their own horses, and they could fly to wherever they were needed on the battlefield, hence the term flying artillery. And they could do this in just a matter of minutes. They could limber up, hook up the cannon, move to a new position, unlimber, and be able and ready to fire in just a matter of minutes. Something no one else could do at the time. And so this rapid mobility and ability to move quickly allowed the Americans to use the cannon much closer to the front lines, because if the infantry started to buckle, the cannon weren't in danger of being overrun, because they could hook up and retreat just as fast, if not faster, than the infantry could. So that allowed the Americans to move their cannon much closer to the front lines, and the end result is the Americans in the Mexican War used their cannons as more of giant shotguns than actual artillery. And if you look up the statistics for the casualty rates, the vast majority of Mexican casualties came from cannon, not rifles, because of this. And so American infantry would come in contact with Mexican infantry, and wherever the fighting was heaviest, or whenever the American infantry regiments would get into trouble, the American general could reposition his cannon, send it right up to the front line, and blast the Mexican, with canister shot. And it was a giant shotgun that just mowed down lines of Mexican infantry. So how that's going to work gameplay-wise is, Americans will have the quote-unquote flying artillery ability, and how that works gameplay-wise is America does not have to have cavalry attached to the cannon to move. So American cannon can move independently by itself without having to tie down cavalry to do it. Mexico won't have that advantage. And America will start the scenario with this technology because historically the Americans had already developed this idea and tactic before the war started, so that'll be a pretty huge advantage for America. And the victory objectives for America is to take Mexico City, so Atlantic side Mexico, and then take all the western states, so Great Plains, southwest United States, western states, and San Francisco. The Mexican victory objectives are pretty much the exact same thing. Just Mexico's victory objectives, they'll get a point for each of those territories I just mentioned that it still holds at the end of the scenario. And if America wins, then America's that much bigger. Then going into the Civil War, that means the North is that much stronger. If Mexico wins, then America doesn't get all those territories, and the North is much smaller and much weaker going into the Civil War, which will make it much easier for the Confederates to win. So this scenario will have a direct influence on the Civil War. Oh, sorry, the next scenario is not the Civil War. The next scenario is the Crimean War. So this won't have any effect on the Crimean War, but when the American Civil War comes around, this will have direct repercussions for how that scenario begins. I think that's it. All the technology, some of the technology from the Napoleonic scenario carries over. So all cannon, American and Mexican, all cannon have first strike ability now, and that will be from this point on. All cannon will have first strike capability. The infantry squares do not carry over. That's a kind of a British unique thing, and didn't really have any solid applications after that, because this is the era and time frame where we start getting into rifled muskets, and so infantry muskets and rifles are become much more accurate, and so the role of the cavalry will be steadily diminishing pretty much from this point on to the point where we get to the Civil War. Cavalry were used as almost exclusively as scouts. Very rarely did you see, the traditional glorious cavalry charge into the midst of the enemy. Very rarely will you see that historically from this point on. They're used almost exclusively as scouts, being the eyes and ears of the army. So the need and use for the infantry square started to diminish after the Napoleonic Wars, like I said, because of the increased accuracy of the infantry weapons. They're improving technology of cannon, and they're improving accuracy. Just made the infantry square formation more and more obsolete. So infantry square does not carry forward, but the French cannon does carry forward, so all cannon from this point on have first strike. And American cannon specifically can move without cavalry. And I think that's it. So we'll cut it off here, and we'll come back with the first turn of the Mexican-American War. We'll see you then. Hello everybody, this is Nato at the Nest with the first half of the 1846 turn of the Mexican-American War. And before we get into the turn of the game, we just got in our battle dice. These are a creation from Young Grasshopper. You can get them on historicalboardgaming.com. And I won't go into explaining exactly how they work, because General Hand Grenade on his channel does a really good video on explaining how these work and how you can really make rolling your dice for combat much more efficient, a lot quicker, a lot easier. So if you're looking to get those, or wanting information on those, go over to General Hand Grenade's channel, and he has like I said, he has a very good video explaining all that. So, to get into the turn, Mexico goes first, and it invaded Texas, and everything missed. So, other than the zone being contested and American production going down by 3, nothing changed. Then Mexico just bought an infantry, cavalry, and cannon, and that was it. So America, its only attack was it took cavalry that was in Heartland and came over and attacked the Great Plains territory in Mexico, and once again everything missed. So kind of a anticlimactic start. No one hit anything, but that will surely change. So America bought transport, another cannon that put down in Texas, 3 cavalry and infantry and a cannon in Washington, and then moved the infantry from Washington to the Appalachians, and then bought 4 militia to guard the America's frontier territories. So those 2 there, and those two up there, which, to guard the frontiers just in case Mexico does something weird and sends some cavalry to try to outflank U.S. forces or something like that. And that was the turn. Pretty quick, opening first turn of any game is of this variety is usually fairly quick because not a lot of fighting, because everyone has to build up their forces and get them to their front line. So quick turn. So strategy for America is to fight Texas. Obviously, not give Texas up, but America's also going to launch a major campaign towards the west. It could just go straight for Mexico City if it takes the capital. It could just, then that's just an automatic win. But throwing everything into one front, that would allow Mexico to defend a lot easier. So if America just bought a bunch of stuff and just sent it straight down to Mexico City through Texas, then Mexico could just sit in Mexico City and just build, giving the Mexicans a choke point that makes it a lot easier to defend. So by America going west and going after these territories, that's going to force Mexico to divert troops away from Mexico City to defend these, because Mexico just turtles in Mexico City and gives these western territories to America. Then, by the point structure, then America wins. So Mexico has to hold at least half of the territories, and that consists of over half. So by America going west, it forces Mexico to follow, therefore diverting and weakening Mexican forces guarding the capital. And therefore dividing, making this a two-front war for Mexico. And Mexico has a production of 11, America has a production of 40. America can very much afford to do that. So by forcing a two-front war, that stretches Mexico's already very limited resources even further. So that's going to be general American strategy, is to fight Texas, go west, or west that way, and as you saw, that transport, America has a navy, so America also has the option of using a navy to open up a third front somewhere if it wants to. So Mexico, Mexico is going to be primarily defensive. If before anyone did any turns, if you ended, Mexico would win by default, because the point system is Mexico has to hold all of its territories, and America has to take as many Mexican territories as it can, and whoever has the majority wins, essentially. So Mexico can win the scenario by playing just strictly defense. It moved into Texas, just to deprive America from as much production as it can. But other than that, moving to Texas, Mexico is going to be playing pretty much exclusively defensively, and just picking it's going to have to just pick its battles very carefully. Fight as much as it can, defend as much as it can. Probably, fight a delaying action. Might have to give ground on a territory or two, to build up defenses in other areas. But So Mexico's its strategy is very simple, just defend and hold ground, but it's going to be it's going to be tough for Mexico to do that because of the production disparity. So with that, we'll end it here. We'll come back with the second half of 1864 and see what happens. 1846, not 64, being dyslexic again, 1846.
Hey, thanks for watching Axis and Allies players. Don't forget to hit a squat on that like button. If you'd like to see more videos just like this, go ahead and click on our subscribe button. You can view all of our other videos on our playlist right here on Viper and Nato, straight from the nest coming at you from historical board games, Z-Man Games, Parker Brothers, Hasbro, and Wizards of the Coast. Thanks for watching, guys, and we'll see you on the next round.